So we looked at what factors influence popularity of non-democratic leaders. And indeed, like we would expect, if economy is doing better, leader is more popular. But interestingly, what we also find is leaders also can convince people that they are doing even better economically than they are. And censorship and propaganda helps. And one of the things we see is if you remove internet censorship and traditional censorship, Putin's approval ranking, which was at that point 70, would go down to 35. So it's already a big difference. And this is not something that should surprise us. You remember the last Levada polls before the full-scale invasion run in the fall of 2021 would give about 30% of Russians who would vote for Putin if election happens next Sunday. About 30% also said that they would vote for United Russia. United Russia got 50%, and then got 50% of the vote and 70% of the seats. That's how we get from 30 to 70, right? You steal elections and you change constitutional system to make sure that you get more seats than votes. But in any event, I don't think that Putin and United Russia are very popular. But on top of that, I think that censorship and propaganda are very important. And I think whatever happens, democratic Russia will not emerge unless we free up media space, unless we actually invest in both free debate, but also a better school education. This is not surprising that Putin is now working so much on history education in schools. I think part of your forum is about saying no to empire. Part of imperialism that is quite common in Russia, I would not deny that, is coming from the fact that people would read a history textbook and then never read any social science textbook ever again. And I studied in Soviet school, so I can tell you read Soviet school's history textbook, you know that Russia is always surrounded by enemies who try to chip in into Russian territory. And that's why Russia, to defend itself, always needs to grab more and more land. And this is something which is very much incorporated in the way of thinking. And that needs to be fought. And this, I think, was one big mistake that we've not done in the last 30 years. And it's going to be even harder now because Putin will work full-time until he's gone. He will work full-time on brainwashing younger people. And I think this is a very big challenge. But once again, the fact that shops are full convince some people. But overall, Russians, if you look at purchasing power of Russian households, is not higher than before the war. And the fact that Russians are not criticizing Putin is not because they're happy, but because this is not a democracy. When Damon was talking about wobbliness of democratic regimes, democratic leaders have made a lot of mistakes. And a lot of mistakes resulted in the rise of populism and losing popularity of democratic model around the world. But there is not a bug, it's a feature that public opinion of democratic leaders is always much more negative than public opinion of non-democratic leaders. Do we hear a lot of criticism of Chinese government? More now, as Damon said, but much less so than criticism of President Biden from Republican Party and from Democratic Party. And that's normal, and that's how it should be. So whenever people living in Russia are telling you, well, life is going on, things are okay, that doesn't mean that they really think it, because it's just a very different environment.